you're under arrest.
I am a lieutenant colonel. This is a mistake.
Hands behind your back. Do it now. That's it.
You're not hearing me.
Stop talking.
Officer Silas Burke believed he was answering a standard call. It was a routine dispatch to investigate suspicious activity at a roadside service station on the outskirts of a rural Maryland county. The tip had been anonymous, the description vague, a black male loitering near the pumps. But for Burke, that was usually enough. In his mind, his badge granted him the authority to demand answers, and the uniform ensured he would receive compliance. He had spent 15 years patrolling these country roads, and he had learned to trust his gut over the details. But when he rolled his cruiser into the gravel lot of the Crossroads fuel stop at 7:15 on a humid Wednesday evening, his gut led him straight into a catastrophe of his own making. What Burke didn't know was that the man standing at Pump 4 was not a drifter or a criminal. He was Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thorne, a 45-year-old career officer in the United States Air Force with 22 years of service. He was a man who had led squadrons in combat zones, a man who currently served as a strategic advisor to the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the Pentagon. And perhaps most importantly for what was about to unfold, he was a man who understood the chain of command, the Constitution, and the weight of authority far better than the deputy who was about to arrest him. As Burke stepped out of his car, adjusting his belt, his body camera began to buffer, capturing the 30 seconds prior to activation. It was a silent witness to a career-ending mistake. Before we dive into the details of this incredible confrontation, I want to welcome you to the channel. We explore the stories where power meets accountability and where the truth is often found in the footage. If you're watching from the US or anywhere else in the world, let us know in the comments. And if you believe that nobody should be above the law and nobody should be beneath its protection, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss how this story ends. The sun was setting behind the pine trees that lined Route 301, casting long orange shadows across the pavement of the Crossroads fuel stop. It was a quiet evening. The hum of the cicadas was louder than the traffic on the highway. Lieutenant Colonel Thorne had just finished a grueling 15-hour day at the Pentagon, reviewing classified readiness reports for the Pacific Theater. He was tired. His shoulders ached under the starch of his uniform, but his posture remained impeccable. He stood by his dark gray sedan, watching the numbers tick up on the fuel pump. He was wearing his service dress uniform, the blues. To anyone with even a passing knowledge of the military, his status was obvious. The silver oak leaves on his epaulets shone in the fading light. The rows of ribbons on his chest told a story of 2 decades of excellence. The Bronze Star for Valor, the Meritorious Service Medal, the Air Medal. His nameplate, Thorne, was pinned perfectly above his pocket. He was checking his email on his phone, a final scan of the day's crises, when he heard the crunch of tires on gravel. He looked up. A county sheriff's cruiser had pulled up at an aggressive angle, blocking the exit path of his vehicle. The door opened and a deputy stepped out. Officer Silas Burke was a man who wore his authority heavily. He was in his late 30s with a buzz cut and a tendency to escalate situations before they had even begun. He had been the subject of 22 internal complaints over his 15-year career, most alleging aggressive behavior or racial bias. But in a small department where everyone knew everyone, complaints had a way of disappearing into filing cabinets. Burke walked toward the pump, his hand resting casually but deliberately near the grip of his sidearm. His eyes were fixed on Thorne. He didn't see the rank. He didn't see the ribbons. He saw a black man in a nice car in a rural county where he didn't belong. "Hey there," Burke called out. His voice wasn't friendly, it was a challenge. "What are you doing out here?" Thorne lowered his phone. He turned to face the officer, his movements slow and deliberate. He had been trained to de-escalate, to assess threats, to maintain composure under fire. He recognized the tone immediately. "I am refueling my vehicle, Deputy," Thorne said. His voice was calm, the deep baritone of a man used to giving orders that were followed without question. "We got a call," Burke said, stopping 10 feet away. The gap was intentional, close enough to intimidate, far enough to react. Someone said there was a guy casing the store, acting suspicious. Thorne looked at the brightly lit convenience store where a clerk was visibly stocking shelves through the window. He looked back at the deputy. "I have been here for 3 minutes," Thorne said. "I am on my way home from work. As you can see by my uniform, I am an officer in the United States Air Force." Burke scoffed. It was a sound of dismissal, a rejection of the visual evidence right in front of him. "Yeah, I see the costume," Burke said. "You got some ID to back that up?" Thorne's jaw tightened. The insult was sharp, but he didn't take the bait. "It is not a costume, Deputy," Thorne said, his voice dropping a degree in temperature. "It is the uniform of the United States military. And yes, I have identification." Thorne reached slowly into his interior jacket pocket. Burke tensed, his hand twitching on his belt. Thorne noticed the reaction and moved even slower, telegraphing every inch of his motion until he produced his wallet. He flipped it open to reveal his common access card, the standard Department of Defense ID. "Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thorne," he said, "Pentagon active duty." Burke squinted at the card but didn't take it. He didn't want to verify it. He wanted to find a flaw in it. "I don't know," Burke said, shaking his head. "Looks like it could be printed off the internet. Anyone can buy a badge these days. Step away from the car." "Excuse me?" Thorne asked. "I said step away from the car," Burke barked. "I need to pat you down. Officer safety. We don't know who you are or what you've got in that vehicle." Thorne didn't move. He stood his ground, not aggressively, but immovably. "Deputy, I am a senior commissioned officer in the federal government," Thorne said. "I have identified myself. I have committed no crime. I am not consenting to a search. Under the Fourth Amendment, you have no probable cause to touch me or my vehicle." At that moment, a second cruiser pulled into the lot. Officer Elena Rodriguez stepped out. She was younger, a former Army corporal who had joined the force 3 years ago. As she walked up, her body camera captured the scene, a high-ranking Air Force officer standing respectfully but firmly against a deputy who was losing control of the situation. Rodriguez froze. She saw the oak leaves. She saw the stack of ribbons. She recognized the ribbon for the Iraq campaign immediately. Her stomach dropped. She knew exactly who this man was, and she knew exactly how badly her partner was messing up, but she didn't speak. In the culture of the department, you didn't question a senior officer in the field. You backed them up, right or wrong. It was a silence she would regret for the rest of her life. Burke moved closer to Thorne. "I'm not asking you. I'm telling you. Put your hands on the car or you're going in." Thorne looked at Rodriguez, locking eyes with her. He saw the recognition in her face. He saw the hesitation. "Deputy," Thorne said to her, "you know what this uniform means? You know I am a federal officer." Rodriguez looked down at her boots. She said nothing. "Last warning," Burke shouted, pulling his handcuffs from his belt. "Turn around." "I am complying under duress," Thorne stated clearly, for the benefit of the cameras he knew were rolling. "I am stating for the record that this is an unlawful arrest. I am a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force, and I am being detained without cause." Thorne turned. He placed his hands on the roof of his sedan. He spread his feet. He allowed Burke to grab his wrists, pull them behind his back, and ratchet the handcuffs tight. The metal clicked shut. The sound echoed in the quiet evening air. Burke shoved Thorne against the car, patting him down roughly. He pulled the colonel's wallet, his phone, his keys. He tossed them onto the hood of the car like trash. "You're under arrest for obstruction of justice and disorderly conduct," Burke announced. From the convenience store, the manager, a man named Gary Wilson, had come out. He was filming with his phone. "Officer," Wilson yelled, "that guy comes in here all the time. He's a soldier. What are you doing?" "Back off," Burke yelled at the witness. "Or you're next." Burke grabbed Thorne by the arm and marched him toward the cruiser. Thorne didn't struggle. He didn't shout. He walked with his head high, his dignity intact even in chains. As Burke shoved him into the back seat, Thorne looked directly into the lens of the body camera. "My name is Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thorne," he said calmly. "Service number redacted. I am requesting that you contact the base commander at Joint Base Andrews immediately. You have just arrested a Pentagon official on active duty. The clock is ticking, Deputy." Burke slammed the door. He got in the front seat, adrenaline pumping, convinced he had just taken down a dangerous criminal. He had no idea he had just pulled the pin on a grenade that was about to blow his entire department apart. We are just getting started with this story, and already the tension is unbearable. It's hard to watch someone do everything right and still be treated like a criminal. It makes you wonder, if a lieutenant colonel isn't safe from profiling, who is? If you're finding this story compelling, please take a second to like the video. It helps us get these stories out to more people. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been in a situation where authority figures refuse to listen to reason? The drive to the county jail took 20 minutes. For Burke, it was a victory lap. For Thorne, it was a tactical pause. He sat in the back of the cruiser, his wrists aching, his mind racing. He wasn't thinking about bail. He was thinking about the chain of command. When they arrived at the intake center, the mood shifted instantly. The booking sergeant, a man named Daniels, looked up from his desk as Burke walked in with his prisoner. Daniels had been a Marine for 8 years. He saw the uniform. He saw the rank. His eyes went wide. "Burke," Daniels said, standing up slowly, "why is there a bird colonel in cuffs in my lobby?" He was acting disorderly, Burke said, dismissing the concern. Refused to ID properly, resisted a search. Daniels looked at Thorne. Thorne looked back, his expression stony. "Uncuff him," Daniels said. "What?" Burke asked. "I said uncuff him," Daniels barked. "Right now. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I followed procedure," Burke insisted. "He's a suspect." "He's a lieutenant colonel," Daniels shouted. "Look at his chest, you idiot. That's a Bronze Star. Get those cuffs off him before the feds tear this building down brick by brick." Burke hesitated, then reluctantly unlocked the handcuffs. Thorne rubbed his wrists. He adjusted his jacket. He smoothed his tie. "I need a phone," Thorne said. "I need to contact the Pentagon duty officer. Protocol requires I report an arrest immediately." Daniels handed him the phone on the desk. "Of course, Colonel. Take your time." Thorne dialed a number he knew by heart. "Pentagon Watch Center. This is Lieutenant Colonel Thorne. I am currently being detained at the King George County Sheriff's Office in Virginia. I was arrested while in uniform returning from duty. I am requesting immediate legal assistance and notification of the Judge Advocate General." The voice on the other end of the line was crisp and professional. "Understood, Colonel. Are you injured?" "Negative," Thorne said, "but my civil rights have been violated, and I am being held without probable cause. Stand by, Colonel. We are activating the alert roster." At the Pentagon, the call triggered a cascade of events that moved with the speed and force of a military strike. The watch officer notified the Air Force General Counsel. The General Counsel notified the Inspector General. Within 30 minutes, a call was placed to the FBI field office in Richmond. Back at the jail, Burke was writing his report, trying to frame the narrative. He wrote that Thorne had been belligerent. He wrote that he assumed a fighting stance. He was digging his hole deeper with every lie. At 9:30 p.m., the phone in Sheriff Miller's office rang. Sheriff Miller was at home, asleep. He answered groggily. "Sheriff, this is General Patricia Vance, Deputy Chief of Staff for the Air Force," a voice said. "I have one of my officers in your jail. He is a key advisor to the Joint Chiefs. I want to know why he is in a cell, and I want him released to federal custody immediately." Sheriff Miller woke up very quickly. By 10 p.m., a black SUV pulled up to the jail. Two men in suits stepped out. They were agents from the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, OSI. They didn't ask for permission to enter. They walked straight to the booking desk. "We are here for Colonel Thorne," the lead agent said. Daniels pointed to the holding area. Thorne was sitting on a bench, still in uniform, reading a magazine. He stood up as the agents approached. "Colonel," the agent said, "we're here to take you home." Thorne nodded. He turned to Burke, who was watching from the doorway. "You have made a grave error, Deputy," Thorne said. "I suggest you retain counsel." Thorne walked out of the jail, a free man. But the war was just beginning. The investigation that followed was not a local internal affair. It was a federal dissection. The FBI Civil Rights Division took the lead, working in conjunction with the OSI. They didn't just want Burke's report. They wanted everything. They subpoenaed the body camera footage from both officers. They subpoenaed the security footage from the gas station. They subpoenaed the dispatch logs and the text messages from Burke's phone. What they found was a roadmap of prejudice. The body camera footage was damning. It showed Thorne being perfectly calm. It showed him identifying himself clearly. It showed Burke escalating the situation without any provocation. But the text messages were the nail in the coffin. At 7:45 p.m., 30 minutes after the arrest, Burke had texted his partner, bagged a soldier boy at the pump, thought he was hot stuff. He's cooling off in the cage now. At 8 p.m., he texted a friend, another one in a costume. They think the uniform protects them. Not in my town. The investigators also looked into Burke's history. They found the 22 previous complaints. They found a pattern of stops involving minority drivers that had no legal basis. They found a culture of silence in the department that had protected him for years. The United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia decided to make an example of Deputy Burke. They indicted him on federal charges, deprivation of rights under color of law, 18 U.S.C. Section 242. But they didn't stop there. Because Thorne was a federal officer engaged in his duties, commuting to and from a duty station is considered part of the service in this context. They added charges for false imprisonment of a federal official and obstruction of justice for the false report he filed. The trial began 18 months later. The courtroom was packed. Half the audience was in military uniform. The prosecution's case was simple. They played the video. The jury watched in silence as Burke mocked a decorated officer. They watched as he ignored the identification. They watched as he handcuffed a man who had served his country in 2 wars. Officer Rodriguez, Burke's partner, had cut a deal. In exchange for immunity, she testified against him. "I knew it was wrong," she told the jury, tears streaming down her face. "I saw the rank. I knew he was real. but I was afraid to speak up. Deputy Burke has a temper. In our department, you don't cross him. Her testimony shattered the blue wall of silence. It exposed the toxic culture that allowed bad officers to thrive. Colonel Thorne took the stand on the third day. He wore the same uniform he had worn the night of the arrest. "Colonel," the prosecutor asked, "why didn't you resist? You are a combat veteran. You could have physically overpowered Deputy Burke." Thorne looked at the jury. "I did not resist because I respect the law," he said, "even when the law is being twisted by someone who does not understand it. I knew that if I fought, I would be just another suspect. I had to be perfect so that the injustice would be undeniable." Burke's defense was weak. He claimed he feared for his safety. He claimed he made a good faith mistake. But the text messages destroyed any claim of good faith. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing was held a month later. The judge, a stern woman who had reviewed every second of the footage, looked down at Burke. "Deputy Burke," she said, "you wore a badge that represents the public trust. You used it as a weapon to humiliate a man who has dedicated his life to protecting that trust. You didn't just arrest a man, you assaulted the dignity of his service." She sentenced him to 5 years in federal prison, but the fallout didn't end with Burke. The Department of Justice opened a pattern or practice investigation into the Sheriff's Department. They found systemic issues with training, supervision, and accountability. The sheriff was forced to resign. The department entered into a consent decree requiring federal oversight for the next 10 years. Colonel Thorne sued the county civilly. The case settled for $1.2 million. Thorne donated the entire amount to a legal defense fund for victims of police misconduct. 3 years later, Colonel Marcus Thorne is now a full colonel. He sits in his office at the Pentagon looking out the window at the Potomac River. On his wall, framed next to his medals, is a copy of a new Department of Defense directive. It is informally known as the Thorne Rule. It mandates that civilian law enforcement must immediately contact the military command whenever a service member in uniform is detained, and it requires enhanced training for police departments near military bases on how to identify military credentials. Thorne doesn't think about Burke often. He thinks about the young privates and sergeants who might be driving home in uniform tonight. He thinks about ensuring they get home safe. He picks up his cap, checks his reflection in the glass, and walks out the door. This story is a stark reminder of what happens when power is unchecked by principle. Officer Burke had the authority, but he lacked the wisdom. Colonel Thorne had the power, but he chose discipline. It brings us to a difficult question. Colonel Thorne was able to get justice because of his rank, his connections, and his perfect conduct. But what if he had been a private? What if he had been a civilian with no connections? Would the outcome have been the same? Or would he still be sitting in that jail cell waiting for a lawyer who never calls? Justice shouldn't depend on how many ribbons you have on your chest. It should be the standard for everyone. What do you think? Was 5 years enough for the officer? And how do we fix a system where you have to be a Pentagon official to get basic respect? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to see more stories where the truth is uncovered and accountability is served, make sure you're subscribed. We'll see you in the next video.